All right, we got ourselves, a couple of more games here in college basketball, including the Final Four coming up this weekend. Eventually, there will be a championship game, but we have another championship game tonight as well, don't we? At the NIT, you mix in the Final Four there in the women's bracket. And boy, oh boy, we still have a little bit of college basketball business to finish. We're going to do our best here today to kind of point out a few of the better angles, maybe a few of the better bets that are left on the board. And we're going to do it with two of the best at Wager Talk as we welcome in Double R1L, Steve Merrill in the house here, not to mention the Godfather, Mr. Marco D'Angelo, ready to roll here and talk some college basketball. And for those of you joining us on the live stream right now, we welcome you guys in, and those on the replay, don't forget, we have full game breakdowns on all of the college basketball slate in the description below. Merrill's done some great in-depth game previews. You'll see Marco's clip as well with Wager Talk today. So we got a lot of college basketball information for you down in the description, not to mention a couple of picks here on this show. So, gentlemen, let us dive in here, Merrill, to game number one, which in a lot of people's eyes is the one game that maybe the upset will happen in. And that, of course, is North Carolina State doing unbelievable things when you think about where they were at the start of the ACC tournament to where they are right now. I think I heard Jay Billis refer to it as the most unbelievable run that he has ever seen in college basketball. And he remembers, he said he was a freshman when the 83 team at North Carolina State won the championship. And he said, this pales in comparison to what this team is doing. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but can they win this game?
Well, first of all, Purdue on the money line mathematically has an 80% chance of winning straight up. UConn has about an 86% chance. So, yes, you're right. Alabama, 14%. NC State by default at 20% has the better chance of pulling the upset. It's just a 9-point dog versus an 11.5-point dog. And the two games are interesting because the lines have been adjusted about a full basket based on my power rating in both games. We'll talk about the UConn one in a moment, but on this one, I do think the line is short. In fact, if you look at just the raw efficiency rankings like KenPom, anywhere else you want to go, and you factor in pace of play, a fair line would be about 10 to 11, and this line is only 9. We even saw it as low as 8.5 this week in some of the more public books, and that's, of course, because NC State is a huge public underdog, and they're the same way against Duke. And they obviously got it done. I thought they outplayed Duke. Nothing fraudulent there. But I think Purdue is a better team. Huge size edge down low with Edey also. 7'4", 300-pound behemoth from Toronto, Canada. And NC State is not a good three-point shooting team. They rely on scoring down low. They go through Burns Jr. For the most part. And he has struggled against bigger centers this season. So I don't think it's a good matchup for NC State. And the other reason I say they're a public dog is I do my Fade the Public video, and I'll have that up here on Friday night for you. Check that tomorrow. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. But as you mentioned, Joe, I did advanced previews for both of the standalone games. And although I didn't talk about the public data too much, NC State, spoiler alert, is going to be a big public dog when all is said and done. But even some of the comments coming in on that Purdue and NC State video, and I love it when people comment. I read them all. I reply back. Several people have said, how do you measure the heart of NC State? How many points is that worth? And, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but I think the other three teams that have made the Final Four have a lot of heart as well. They all want to be here. So it's kind of comical to me now that everyone thinks NC State is a team of destiny. I'll get Marco's take on that. I'm sure he and I handicap very similar. I'm not sure you really factor destiny into the power ratings when you're handicapping games. But there's all these 1983 comparisons to Jim Valvano and company. And sure, NC State could win it. It happens. But the metrics don't look good for them, and I don't think the matchup does either. In fact, I think one of the best ways to play this game is NC State team total under 68.5. Just as I mentioned earlier, bad matchup down low for a team that doesn't shoot the three well.
So interesting, Marco. I think you and I have actually bet on a horse named Destiny in the third Gulfstream.
How'd that work out?
His ass dead last, as a matter of fact. I think he's still out in the parking lot with Mike Smith on board.
The horse, it didn't have any heart, Joe. It didn't want it as bad as the other horses.
Yeah,
NC State wants it more than the other three teams.
Anybody that has figured out a way to quantify heart and destiny and all of that crap, please drop it in the comment section. We'd love to know exactly what is that worth here, Marco, because we've seen a lot of teams with heart that, aren't holding the hardware or the trophies here. Now, it's been a great story, but to me, usually at this time of year, talent wins out, usually, right? I mean, who's the more talented team here?
Well, all that talk with the heart and everything, that's just all bullshit to try to handicap the game. You got to look at Cinderella. They're Cinderella.
Mhm.
That's what you got to look at.
Slipper factor.
Is midnight coming? It eventually comes at some point. Is this the game? And, I agree. It's a great story with NC State, but let's be realistic. They've won 9 in a row. 7 of them as underdogs. That's the impressive part. But what has changed with this NC State team is the way that they have ratcheted down defensively. Now, normally, Joe, you've done enough shows with me that, I scream from the rooftops, give me the better defensive team catching points. I'm going to line up there all the time. So that would, on the surface, send me to looking at NC State. The last 6 games, they've held their opponents to under 38% shooting, 38% or less for 6 straight games. That's going to win you ball games. But as Steve pointed out, this is a different animal in Purdue. This is old school basketball. Okay. You got 7'4", Zach Edey there that, they pound the ball into him. They go through him. He's not the new wave big man that you see that so many NBA teams love nowadays that can take the defender out, close to the 3-point line. They're going to go old school and pound it inside. Will NC State be able to handle that? And NC State, Purdue doesn't play bad defense either. Purdue can play both ways. They can play a physical game with NC State. For NC State to have a chance in this game, they got to play that half-court game and hope that they can slow down, Zach Edey enough that, somebody else has to step up. Ask Tennessee how that worked out. Not too well. 39 minutes on the floor of the 40-minute game. He scores 40 points in 39 minutes. Everything inside the paint or at the foul line. This is, like I said, old school basketball. And with that, I lean to Purdue, but I'll tell you what I think the better play is here. And I'm looking at the total. And I'm going to take a page out of a very wise man that doesn't want to sit around for the whole game. And that would be you, Joe. I'm going to look at the first half in this game. And you look at it, and as I said, I broke it down in depth on WagerTalk today. You can check out that video if you want to see it. But to sum it up shortly, we know that the first time when you play in a new venue, especially a venue of this size for the national championship game, sight lines and everything's going to be different. So teams have a tendency to get off to a slow start in the game. You also have the nerve factor. Teams, they're going to come out, they're going to be tight. That lends to lower scoring at the beginning. And just see this game, as I said, NC State wants to make it an ugly game. They want to make Purdue have to work for it, and Purdue is fine with that. Purdue only averages 58 shots per game, so they're not a fast-paced team. They make the most out of those shots because they're generally getting high percentage shots when you got a 7'4" guy in the middle there putting it up. So I'm going to look under first half. I think that is the way to go in this game. Don't have to worry about those silly fouls at the end of the game. Go first half and look at the under there. And as Steve alluded to, some team totals might not be a bad way to go either, because I don't see NC State wanting to play at a faster pace. That team total on them unders looks good as well.
Yeah, no, a couple of different ways to approach. That is for sure here, guys. And I want to, I threw a poll question up in the chat rooms. And again, those of you joining us live here today, Brandon, Cash Out, we appreciate you guys stopping in here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell, become part of the WagerTalk TV family. Also, that thumbs up would be much appreciated here. And those that are watching on the replay, don't forget the links to the games these guys are talking about with full in-depth breakdowns are in the description, so you can check those out at any time. But the question I threw up in the poll, guys, and see what you guys think here, is that I found this last night. I couldn't believe it was offered, because if you are of the mindset that UConn is the winner, trying to come up with some sort of plus money in any way, shape, or form combination that UConn eventually wins, I didn't think it existed. And then I found on FanDuel last night there is an exact final outcome prop, which lists UConn beating Purdue, Purdue beating, and by the way, that was at plus money. That was plus 100. So even money if the exact outcome is UConn beating Purdue for the national championship. And then, of course, it went on from there. And that's what I put into the chat room to see exactly today's poll question, what we think the outcome is going to be. Is it UConn beats Purdue? Is it Purdue beats UConn? Is it UConn beats North Carolina State? Does Alabama show up in the final here? So drop those in there, guys, and we'll see exactly what many of you think is ultimately going to be the final. But keep in mind, the only plus money involving UConn winning anything that we have been able to find. And also, there is an NIT game coming up we're going to talk about as well here tonight. These guys have some thoughts on that. But let's switch to that UConn game, because we do have a bunch of questions coming in on it. Let me start by first asking you, Merrill, what do you think about that? I mean, the fact that you can get UConn winning at the championship at plus money in an exact outcome is beyond. I didn't even think it existed, but I don't know how else you can come up with UConn winning the next two games and get plus money at all.
Well, I'll give you the true odds right now. I just figured them out. For UConn beating Purdue in the finals is 47%. That's what the true odds are based on the market. There's a look-ahead line right now at FanDuel. UConn is 5.5 over Purdue. If you look at the Ken Palms, they'd only be about a 3-point favorite when you factor in the pace and everything. They're 4 in the Raws, but you can't just – that's based on 100 possessions. So 5.5 is inflated, but of course they have to inflate the number because UConn's been crushing teams, and I do think 4 would probably get a lot of one-way action. But so say UConn's a 5.5-point favorite. They have about a 68% chance of winning that game straight up. We have about a 80% chance of each team winning the Final Four. As I mentioned, that's about a 69% chance. So you do the math, it's 47.5% that UConn beats Purdue in the finals. So it's almost even money. It's slightly plus. So that is an interesting way to attack it. As far as the game itself, my raw numbers make UConn a 10-point favorite over Alabama. That's where it briefly opened at some spots, but it's gone up to 11.5, 12 quickly this week. No question that you're going to have to pay a premium to back UConn. It's fully understandable why. They are NCAA history. No team has done what they've done. The last 2 years now, they've won 10 straight tournament games, all by 13 points or more, but that's become so public. You know, you always feel like that's cover material now for Sports Illustrated. And when that happens, you're usually a day late and $1 short. So, yes, Alabama could stay within this inflated number. I'm not getting in front of UConn, though. It's UConn or pass for me, but I'm also not in the habit of laying a full basket of a lack of line value. My other concern in this game is that Alabama is a great offensive team. And if they're hitting those three-point shots like they've done in several of these tournament games, including against Clemson, in which they got outscored, by the way, by 24 points from two-point range. 24 points Clemson had an edge from two-point range. Yeah, I was on Clemson, so I'm a little bit bitter about that. But Bama hit a ton of threes again. So if Bama hits their threes, they can sneak within the back door here. But this is a bad defensive team. And I just want to put this in perspective. Even after winning 4 tournament games, they're still outside the top 100 in the Ken Palm defensive efficiencies, which basically is where they started when the tournament began. They haven't improved it at all despite 4 straight wins. And if you look at the efficiency rankings the last 10 games after winning most of their games in the conference tournament in the NCAA, they're like in the 180s. They've actually gotten worse defensively the last 10 games down the stretch. They cannot slow down UConn. So for that reason, I think the best way to approach this game is a UConn team total over 86.5. I actually posted that as a free play on my page at WagerTalk.com so everyone can see the analysis there. The reason I'm saying off the game total over is because UConn loves to play really slow half court. Bama likes fast up tempo, so I don't want to try to guess which team's going to dictate their tempo, but I think UConn will score regardless of the pace as they have a substantial edge down low with 7'2" Klingon. We got to point out also, you might have seen on Twitter last night, the UConn flight got delayed. I haven't checked the status since, but they're saying they're going to get in like at 5 a.m. if they got in at that time. A couple questions. First of all, that sounds like a conspiracy thing to me. And second of all, why were they even flying commercial if that's what it was? Why did they not have a chartered flight? And third of all, how does a 7'2" center even fly commercial? So that's something to keep an eye on, but they still have a couple days to get ready.
I think they actually flew him there, but that's a different story. Maybe that's a bit, maybe they just threw up a couple of Rolls Royces on his back and flew out to Glendale there, Marco. I'm not a big fan of the whole play a national championship game in a football stadium, but I get it here. It is interesting, and I know there are some questions. I know Brandon in the YouTube Shorts chat room, welcome in, Brandon, as well as a couple of people on Instagram as well have been asking about the total and about that angle, Marco, about sightlines being a little bit differently. It's a totally different atmosphere, one that UConn should be used to at this point since they are the current champs. And this is, this is not their first go around here. But how do you factor that in when looking at the total, which I believe we're being told pretty much FanDuel DraftKings 161 and a half.
Yeah, it's definitely a factor that you got to look at. And when you're talking with the team Alabama, is Steve alluded to, and he talked about being a little bit bitter. I was bitter at the start of the Alabama Clemson game because I had Alabama, and Alabama, they live and die by the 3. And you want to talk about starting a game slow? You couldn't have started it any colder than they did. They were 1 of 13 from 3-point range. And for a team that's going to live and die by the 3, that's not what you want to see. But as you saw, they heated up very quickly. They went on to hit the 15 of their next 23 to finish the game. And that's what gave them the victory over Clemson. Now, here's the dilemma. That was against Clemson. Not that Clemson's a horrible defensive team, but they're not Connecticut, okay? UConn is, absolutely shut down defense. And if Alabama struggles early on, they could find themselves, run out of the building early. And the problem with shooting threes is when you're behind, that rim and that hoop looks a lot smaller than when you're shooting threes with the lead. And that's where the problem can come in. And as Steve said, he looks at Connecticut. It's either Connecticut or pass for him. And yeah, you're laying a premium with Connecticut, but how can you not? This is a team that we are talking about epic proportions. The last team that I've seen a 2-year domination in college basketball, the way we've seen with this UConn team, you got to go all the way back to the 89-90 UNLV teams, where you've seen 2 seasons put together like Connecticut has done. They do it on both sides of the court. We know that they can score. They're a great foul shooting team. They hit 74% of their foul shots, which is key when you're laying points because they're going to get fouled. They're going to have the lead late in the game. Well, if you're making your foul shots, you're going to extend the lead. Then when you turn around and you run back down the other side of the court where the team's got to chuck up threes to try to get back in the game, and you're one of the best defensive teams in the country, yeah, that's not going to work. That's how those leads keep growing for this Connecticut team and why they keep covering. The team's won 11 in a row, and they're 10-1 against the spread. And the only team that was able to cover against them was St. John's in the Big East tournament, a team that, knows them well. They face them, twice a year, sometimes 3 times, and they were able to sneak in under the number. I like this Alabama team. I actually did have Alabama making the Final Four in my bracket. Unfortunately for me, I hit 3 of the 4 teams in my bracket. The problem is the one I missed is the one I had winning it. So that kills that for me. But I think Alabama, if they hit the threes, they can hang around for a while. But I can't step in front of this UConn team. And if you want to talk at the team totals, again, this would be one where I would look at the first half, because come second half, if you're dealing with the over, you're going to be having Connecticut at the foul line. and you're going to have Alabama shooting threes. And if they hit any of those threes late and Connecticut's making those foul shots, you can have that final minute and a half, just a lot of garbage points adding up to the total. So I like the first half. I hate to steal that page out of your book, Joe, but in these situations, I think the first half wagers are better for the totals if you're looking at the under. Totally different story if you're looking at the over.
Yep. I just can't get out of my head a UConn. I mean, we talk about Klinger, we talk about how good they are offensively, but I can't remember a team, holding an elite offense to 52 points, winning by 25 and going 3 of 17 from 3. But it's not just, Illinois. Go down the list of these offensive teams they have played defense against, Merrill. UConn, for all of the accolades, I don't think they get enough credit for what they do defensively to teams and what they have been doing in this run. It's hard for me to get to over 161 and a half, seeing what this team has done to the people that they have played, and they've all been pretty good elite teams.
Yeah, so Illinois was one of the top 2 offenses in the country entering that game. They've now fallen to number 4 in the KenPom rankings. Guess who's number 3 now? It's Alabama. But technically, Illinois was a better offense last week than Alabama is this week. And we saw Connecticut shut them down, like you said, not only hold them to the 50s, low 50s, but they went on a 30-0 run. I've coached some low-level basketball, some really bad teams against good teams, and I've never even seen a 30-0 run, let alone in an Elite 8 matchup. So, that is remarkable. And then, as you said, Joe, 3-point shooting is the great equalizer. It's the great random variance in these one-and-done scenarios. And if you had told me they were going to beat the second-best offensive team in the country by 25 points, going a 30-0 run, you would have thought they probably hit like 7 threes during that 30-0 run. Well, as you said, they only hit 3 the entire game. They were 3 for 17. The Northwestern win by 17 points back on Sunday the 24th in the round of 32. They were 3 for 22 from three-point range. In fact, they haven't had an extreme above-average three-point game in the tournament. Defensively, they have shut down the opponents, but that's what they do, nothing extreme. And then you look at Alabama. As I mentioned earlier, if Bama's not hitting those threes, they don't even beat Clemson. They probably don't beat UNC. Keep in mind, they came out in the second half and shot lights out to beat UNC by only 2. So Bama very well could have been out in the Sweet 16. Now, granted, they might hit some of those shots again, and that's the real X factor here. But I'd rather bet on the consistency and the certainty of UConn. But that's why I'm leaning towards the team total. I just don't see that bad Alabama defense being able to stop them. So I just think UConn over team total is the safest play for that reason.
All right, let's just get this out of the way. All right, Clemson beat Clemson. A 80% free throw shooting team goes 8 of 16.
Best in the tournament. Great point. Yeah,
exactly. So that's 2 games in a row. Congrats, you won, Alabama. But that's also 2 games in a row. The other team did a really, really good job of just bringing it out the silver platter. Here you go. Make a couple of threes and beat us. So screw you, Clemson, and screw the ACC for that matter as well there, Marco. So we've got 2 games coming up in the Final Four. We do have a game coming up tonight in a final in the NIT, which, Marco, you alluded to this. And again, if you're watching this on the replay, don't forget about the links in the description. Marco had a really, really great in-depth breakdown about this on WagerTalk today. The link is there. And, of course, Steve Merrill's got a bunch of videos available right now, in-depth breakdowns on all the games that still remain. But, Marco, for those that are joining us here, I loved what you had to say in the approach in this NIT Championship here tonight. It's not a side. These are 2 teams that you thought might have a little chip on their shoulder to begin with, but maybe not as good as we think they all are. How are you approaching this?
Well, again, you look at this matchup, and it's Indiana State and Seton Hall, and we all talked at great length, Joe, when the committee, announced the field. There were 4 teams that everybody was screaming, that got left out. Well, here's 2 of them. The other 2 that people thought should have been in, or at least I did as well, was St. John's and was Pitt. Well, we don't see those 2 teams because they pouted and took their ball and went home. They opted not to play in the NIT, where these 2 teams did. They played with a chip on their shoulder, and lo and behold, we've got a championship matchup that, for the two teams that probably should have been in the other tournament. I like it that we have that, but let's be honest too. Both teams got easy pass to get here. They both played all their games at home. The NIT, they're not dumb. They wanted to see these two in the final so they could bill it as the snob championship game, or, who got snubbed. And they're doing it. Indiana State, this game's being played in their backyard. It's going to be all Indiana State fans there for this one, as they're playing, at Butler's stadium, arena, I should say. So
Hinkle.
Where I'm looking at in this, I like Indiana State. It's a great story. I have been a big proponent with all of the shows that I do in radio. I think it is absolutely ludicrous that a team can be the best all season long and dominate your conference, but you lose one game at the wrong time in your conference tournament because you're in a so-called mid-major, you get screwed, and that's what happened to Indiana State. I think it's a travesty. You're saying the regular season doesn't mean anything for these mid-major conferences. But then you have the flip side to that story, and you got NC State. Okay, they would have been nowhere in the tournament had they not won, their conference tournament. And so that's the other side of the coin. But I think this total is too high, and I think it's based on the fact that you've got two teams coming off of high-scoring games, especially Indiana State. They're coming off a game in which there was 190 points scored. Now you're looking at a total of 160. How else is the public going to go? When we know that when you're talking totals, I'm sure Steve will agree with this, when he does his public dog stuff and that, when you look at over-unders, where the public's going to go. They don't like betting unders. They like betting overs. So you're going to get some added value there as well. Indiana State has played teams in this NIT tournament so far. 3 of the 4 teams they played like to go faster pace, and that leads to overs. Seton Hall is not going to go fast pace with them. For Seton Hall to beat Indiana State, they want to make it a Big East ugly style basketball game, which means slow it down, pound it inside, and make it a half court game. And to me, that's why I like the under in the game. And like I said, I go in full detail with it on the WagerTalk Today show. You can find that clip, as Joe said.
Yeah, absolutely. Down in the description, guys. Check it out. For those that are joining us live here today, we appreciate you. We appreciate you hanging here as we try to put it all together as college basketball coming to an end. Champions will be crowned here over the next week, and there is one tonight, Merrill, and the NIT game with Seton Hall. We know they're going to come out and play some defense here. I think Indiana State has a bit of a cult following. Got a lot of people jumped on board there with maybe the most memeable. Is that a good turn? The dude there who is just absolutely phenomenal with the goggles there. The guy's got great moves, and he's become like an internet sensation this season here. But do they win the game? I mean, because Seton Hall, we've seen them play some lockdown defense here. How do you approach this game with these two teams here tonight?
Yeah, rule of thumb, guys that have goggles usually play with heart. So that's an extra point right there for Indiana State because they've got more heart.
Also,
goggles equal
ass.
heart.
Have you seen that dude? That dude's got a lot of ass, too. He is.
Needs an arm sleeve to cover that awful tattoo, though. My God, I'm going to buy the dude an arm sleeve and send it to him. But elbow pads and knee pads are worth a point each as well for those of you scoring at home. Yes. So maybe that's how we got to Indiana State -3 because most of my raw power ratings have Indiana State about a 1-point favorite. Now, this game is in Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, so it'll be a strong home crowd edge. I don't want to say home court because both teams just played here 2 nights ago. So I think it's probably less of an advantage here in the second time because Seton Hall is more comfortable. But maybe we'll give them a point. But even that gets it up to 2. It's 3. It's now hitting 3.5 in a lot of spots. So Indiana State does kind of look like the public side here, and I think it's an inflated line. But they're an explosive offensive team. In fact, if you look at effective field goal percentage, which is a mix of being good on both 2s and 3s, they're the number 1 team in the country this year, ahead of even UConn, even ahead of Purdue. So this is a great offense. Problem is the defense is suspect, and that's being nice. They've given up over 50% shooting in each of the last 2 NIT games. They needed 100 points just to win the last game, basically. They gave up 90. So here again, you've got Indiana State over, Seton Hall under, somewhat correlated side in total. Seton Hall's played one up-tempo game this year in which the total was priced at more than 151, and that was a double-digit loss against Iowa back in November. So that is a concern if it's a fast-paced game. But I think the best way to approach this, once again, is a team total. Seton Hall over 78. If Seton Hall slows it down and wins the game, I think they still get to 78 because Indiana State is a bad defense. But if they get caught in an up-tempo game, maybe they don't cover, but they still get over 78. So I just think it's a safer way to approach it, even though the line does look inflated. From a line value perspective, I would lean Seton Hall plus 3.5 or more. But I like the team total over, and they are the much better defensive team. So we'll see if the old adage defense wins championships holds up or not. By the way, if you look at the Ken Palms, St. John's is now 23rd. They were 25th when the tournament began. They're now 23rd. So they were by far the highest rated team not to make the NCAA tournament. I think Pitino had good reason to be upset, and maybe not a total coincidence that they got left out. I don't think the NCAA is a fan of Pitino nowadays. There are metrics like that in politics that go into play behind the scenes. Pittsburgh, the team Marco mentioned, his Pitt Panthers are the second highest Ken Palm team not to be in a postseason tournament. So I do think they were both left out. Seton Hall was up and there on the list as well. And as far as what Marco said about the conference tournaments, I've said this for a while now. I think it's a total shame, like he said, that Indiana State loses that one game by 4 points to Drake and they don't make it. But then again, the more I've thought about it, screw it. It's the conferences themselves. It's their fault. They're the ones that elect to do these tournaments, right? The Ivy League back in the day, the Big Ten back in the day, the regular season winner got in. And I find it hard to believe that these guys are making enough money from the Missouri Valley tournament to offset having Indiana State not win a game or two in the big dance, because I think the conferences get like over $1 million each time a team advances. So I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on. I do like the double and triple buys that a lot of the tournaments are doing, like the West Coast. Even my CAA now gives the top 4 teams a double buy. That somewhat helps. I think home court advantage for the 1 seed would be something to look into also. Logistically, that can get kind of tricky, though, because you might not know till a week out where the tournament's going to be. But then again, I feel bad for these mid-majors, but it's their own fault. You don't have to have a conference tournament. You could do this differently.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's always a better way to do this, but no. It'll always be about what garners the most money. And if you're on the cut line and your school don't make enough cash, guess what? Yes, is on the outside looking in. Not that it wouldn't be a great story, but Indiana State, because they were well deserved of it, but ridiculous. All run by money there. Marco D'Angelo, Steve R1L, Merrill in the house here. We've got a Final Four. We've got championship games still to be played here. And a quick look at the poll question here today. 69% overwhelmingly think UConn is going to beat Purdue. And that is that seems to be the consensus on one side. On YouTube Shorts, ironically enough, NC State or Alabama involved in the title game is getting about 40% here. Marco, you heard Steve tell earlier. I mean, the idea of getting that exact, you're a horse guy, of UConn beating Purdue, that's how this whole thing is going to end at plus 100. If you are looking to back UConn in some way, shape, or form, not a bad way to approach it.
It's definitely not. A couple other things that I'm looking at doing too, Joe, is, we've got a couple days till Saturday. Everybody is a foregone conclusion that Connecticut is going to advance Saturday. Money line on them, obviously, is in the 750 to 800 range, which is, obviously you're not going to make money doing that. But here's a thought. You've got a couple days of action, some baseball plays, hockey plays, some NBA games where you do have some moderately priced teams that you can take on a money line and hook them with Connecticut for Saturday so that Connecticut just has to win. And as we said, this line is inflated. There is no question about it. If you can hook some teams up with Connecticut that brings you a money line parlay of close to even money, and then come back right before game time, if you want to take a little Alabama plus 12, 12.5, that's a pretty nice little middle you can have kind of with a free roll on Saturday. So that is something that I am going to be watching over the next couple days. If I have a a 3.5, 4-point favorite that I don't want to lay the points with, I can just hook them up with Connecticut and get that close to even money. And then as many, whatever I have live on Saturday, if I want to hedge some of that off on a middle on Alabama plus the points, that's what we do.
It's a great, that's a lot of different ways to approach this. That's a great point, Marco. Merrill, we've seen this thing climb as high as 12 with UConn, right? We did see 9.5 on the open with Purdue. It looks like that has come back down. There is still time, obviously, for both of these lines to move here. What do you think the chances of both of these getting to be double-digit favorites? And is there a number on either of these games which is going to force you, if it gets to it, that you might have to consider taking the points here?
I'd be very surprised if Purdue gets to a double-digit favorite. They're currently a solid 9 across the board. Caesars actually still has an 8.5, and I consider that a more public book now that they're nationwide. And the public probably hasn't played much right now. I look at public sentiment indicators, but the public money doesn't really come in until probably Saturday. So if Purdue's only 8.5, 9 right now in the market, it would take a lot of sharp money to offset all that public money that I expect to come in on NC State. So I'd be surprised if that goes higher. If you like Purdue, you maybe hold out if you don't have that 8.5 and wait. But it depends really probably where the sharps come in, and they might know the same thing, so they might be waiting as well. But I don't see that getting too high. The UConn line is interesting, though. It opened 10.5, as you said. It did shoot up to 12, but we've seen a lot of buyback now to 11.5. And although you would think UConn's a very public side with that 13, winning every game by 13, some indicators I look at has a little bit of love for Alabama for the fact that they are so good offensively and they keep getting it done. So I think that one's going to probably close around 11.5, 12 where it is. By the way, look ahead lines for all the possible matchups at FanDuel. If we get the 3% chance that we get Alabama, NC State, and that is the mathematical odds, a 3% chance they both pull the upset. It's Alabama 4.5 over NC State. So it'd actually be a pretty good game. As I mentioned, about a 67 to 68% chance we get Connecticut 5.5 over Purdue. About a 17% chance we get UConn over NC State. And that line right now is 15.5. They will not be rooting for that matchup. And about a 13% chance we get Purdue over Alabama. That's because Alabama's a bigger dog. It's less likely. That's 5.5. So every matchup would be very good except for that 17% chance we get UConn NC State. I'm surprised the odds are that high. We could get that actually on the surface.
Yeah, no, I'd be kind of shocked too. Margo, are you thinking that if you want any one of these teams here, is there a game that you should jump in now, or do you think waiting until figure it out before tip-off before you jump in? So if you want Purdue, do you take it now in case it goes up another half a point or gets to 10, or how do you approach betting now versus waiting until tip-off?
I think what Steve said with Purdue, that there's a chance that you might see this tick back because there is going to be the love for NC State. And every time they mention NC State, you're going to have the reference to the NC State team, Jim Valvano, that pulled off the upset. And everybody loves an underdog story. And Connecticut is so dominant, nobody's looking into the underdog story with Alabama. They're looking at NC State. And as we said, NC State's playing great defense, and Purdue is one of those teams that everything goes around one player. Okay. I mean, he accounts for just about everything. What happens if he gets in foul trouble? God forbid if he gets hurt in the game. That's going to hamper Purdue. And Purdue is one of those teams that, like Virginia, like Arizona over the years, have stubbed their toes. It was just last year mentioning Virginia. Do they repeat what Virginia did a few years ago, get beat by a 16th seed, and then turn around and win the national championship the following year? But Purdue has had a history of stubbing their toe in the big dance. So I think you're going to see some love for NC State come Saturday. Everybody loves an underdog story, but I don't think anybody is getting in front of the Connecticut bandwagon. So that's the one that I do see the underdog getting some love. So if you're waiting on Purdue, I think it's not going to hurt you to wait till Saturday. Connecticut, I would be surprised if that doesn't tick back up on Saturday, because the public, I don't know really anybody that really truly loves Alabama. I know they talk about the threes, but when you're playing a defense like Connecticut's and you can't stop anybody, you're giving up, 80 plus on a regular basis. That's not good.
I just don't know. I mean, what happens if they're not hitting three? I don't think they have a second pitch. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, we've seen UConn blow teams out by 25, can't hit a three. So they have other ways to beat you. What is Alabama's route here outside of they have to be absolutely ridiculous from three against the best defense in the tournament? So I just don't I don't see that happening there. UConn is certainly looking pretty good to at least try and hold on to their championship, right? First time since, what we say, Merrill, early 2000s, I believe, University of
06,
Florida,
07.
Billy Donovan. 06, 07.
Yeah, it's 06, 07 Florida team. But what's more remarkable, Joe, is the number one overall seed, which they started doing like a decade ago. I think this is the first time in a long time that the number one overall has even made the Final Four, let alone wins the whole thing. So UConn is bucking a lot of trends, and you can say, oh, well, they're due to come back down to earth. But it also shows how dominant they really are, because no team in over a decade and 2 decades have won back-to-back. Only like one team in the past decade has made it this far as the number one overall. They're a really good team. Something to point out also in that NC State-Purdue game, only one other time in history has a team won 5 conference tournament games to make the NCAA tournament. That was back in 2011. It was Connecticut. They went on to win the whole thing. That's what NC State did. UConn was a 3 seed, though. They were a much better team coming in. But then the other side of the coin, only one team's ever lost to a 16 seed before Purdue did last year, and that was UVA in 18. They came back and won the whole thing in 19. Matt Painter, though, 1-14 against the spread in Big Ten conference tournament games the last few seasons. Ralph Michaels and Jeff Michaels pointed that out. And he's been eliminated 3 straight years by a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. So we've kind of been anti-Matt Painter. Well, guess what? He could be eliminated by a double-digit seed again this season. Wow. He's not out of the water yet with NC State. So some really interesting angles coming head-to-head in that first game.
Wow, that is disgusting. You even brought that up and put it out into the universe.
Can you imagine?
I absolutely love it. Yes, no, that is terrible. I absolutely love it here. But the bottom line is here, listen, a lot of different ways to approach this week in the Final Four. You do have, of course, the opportunity to bet tonight in the NIT. And again, if you're catching this on the replay, head down to the description, and you've got the links there to some great videos breaking down all of these big games coming up. Steve Merrill as well as Marco D'Angelo. Make sure you check those out. And Marco, locked, loaded, ready to roll here tonight. What do we have at your page at WagerTalk?
Well, right now I've got actually a big NHL game tonight. I don't release a lot of NHL plays, a very particular spot plays, situational plays, and I've got one tonight, and it's my 4% NHL game of the week. Joe, it came very close to being a 5% play. When you read the analysis, you'll understand why. Head over to WagerTalk, check that out, or grab an all-access package, and you'll get all of my plays today, including the NBA. We've been posting our NBA, trying to post it a little bit later in the day because these final 2 weeks of the NBA season, you never know for sure who's in the lineup. You don't want to get burned on last minute, somebody deciding not to play or being added to the starting lineup.
Yeah, no. The last 2 weeks is absolutely abysmal, which is kind of why we have switched the NBA Tipoff Show a little bit, trying to get you guys the information early in the morning and then kind of do an update in the afternoon, because everything we know early changes by the time we get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon these final 2 weeks. So, but we'll be back here at the top of the hour, next hour there, 4 o'clock Eastern time. We'll give you the latest. I mean, some terrible news for the Knicks coming down, a huge game in Philly with the Miami Heat and the Sixers. So there are some games here coming up tonight. We'll give you the latest on. And Merrill, locked and loaded, I know you are ready to go. What is on your page at wagertalk.com for tonight?
Yeah, you stole my thought there. I was going to say, Marco brings up an excellent point about the NBA. We should have an up-to-date show at 4:15 Eastern every day where we tell you the latest injuries and the line moves. We're doing it, and I'll be on today with Ralph Michaels. So I'm looking forward with Joe Ranieri and Ralph Michaels, myself, Steve Merrill. After 4 o'clock Eastern today, we'll break down all 5 games. We'll take live questions, so please chat and comment with us. And I did a standalone video right before this show on that Sixers Heat game. Embiid currently listed as questionable. He made his return Tuesday night, an 8.5-point line adjustment from when he was ruled out in the morning to when he played. So a lot to talk about in the NBA today at 4 o'clock Eastern. Speaking of the NBA, nobody in the history of WagerTalk.com has won more on NBA sides. I've been on the site for 3.5 years, and I am number one again this season, 55 and 35 on NBA sides. I've got 2 of them going tonight on Thursday. I've also got my top Final Four best bet available. I did not give it out here on the show. It's something different. I made a 3-for-1 combo. Each play is 25. You can get all 3 for 29. That's like getting the extra NBA game and the college best bet for $2 each. Everyone loves $2 Tuesday. Well, what about $2 Thursday? A 3-for-1 combo right now. Also have a special promo code on my page where you get the rest of the NBA season, my number one ranked NBA for the rest of the season, the next 3 months through the finals for less than $3 a day. So check all of that out along with daily free plays. I have also a NCAA Final Four free play on my page right now, Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com.
All right, guys, a lot of reasons to head over to WagerTalk.com. A lot of reasons for you to check out the description and the links available to you here, as we've got great best bet game previews. Everything you need to know about the upcoming college basketball slate is just a couple of clicks away. On behalf of Marco and Steve Merrill, hope you guys will come back and join us at the top of next hour for the NBA Update Afternoon Show. Here is we'll do our very best to get you caught up with everything that's happening in the NBA, and a lot of changes here, guys. But until then, best of luck with all your plays here tonight. Make sure you hit that subscribe and that thumbs up, and come back and join us again soon. We'll see you then.